Good morning. My name is Scott Stanfield. I am the modern longevitarian, and this is episode 62 with my dear friend and special guest, Jay Panther. I normally don't do guests on Monday, but we squoze him in here, and that's my proper Southern English. And Jay is from the South too, so he knows what that means. But anyway, I want to say welcome to everybody watching on the Spirituality Gone Wild Network, and everybody joining in on LinkedIn. This is going to be a super fun episode. And you guys may or may not know, if you're just a first time watcher or listener to the show, is that I've written a book on sleep. It's called Outstanding Landing: How to Get to Sleep of Your Dreams. And it was inspired by a quote by the late Chuck Yeager, first pilot to break the sound barrier in a level flight. He was flying in a plane titled the Bell X-1 and just passed away on December 7th. And what I'm doing is actually creating a masterclass on this book that is going to be just in 2 weeks on Saturday. And so I'll put a link up as once I get everything, all the sign up and all those things. It's going to be a free masterclass that we're going to go through the 7 steps to sound sleep. Now, you see how I did that? Sound barrier, sound sleep, right? All these things with Chuck Yeager, and a super cool way of you actually walking away from that 1-hour masterclass with a plan on how you can get the sleep of your dreams. And so I encourage you to stay tuned as the links come, and I will populate those in all the past episodes that I can, starting with this one with my friend Jay. And without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and bring my man Jay Panther on, and we can get started. So, Jay Panther, welcome to the Modern Longevitarian live show, episode number 62.
Thank you. I am stoked to be here and hang out with you, Scott. Any excuse to have a good long conversation with you, I'll take.
Thank you, man. And me too. You know, we've had some amazing conversations, and I remember the first time that I ever saw you at church, because we went when you were here in Park City, you went to Mountain Life Church, and you had no shoes on, right? Yeah, and everybody thought that you were another Olympic athlete who just won a gold, right, for the snowboarding, but yet you actually were on the U.S. ski team, not the snowboarding aspect of that. And my son went up and my wife went up and talked to you, and we met you at church that first day. So I don't know if you remember that or not, but that was the first time that we met. So,
gosh, you know what? I'm embarrassed to say I don't know if I do remember that, but my memory isn't always the greatest. I think that I thought we had met that first time when I interviewed at Ruth's Chris, but maybe I'm misremembering.
Well, yeah, you came into Ruth's Chris, and then I was like, oh, I know this guy, and we met at church, and we did that, but
Okay.
yeah, but maybe it's just my wife and son went up and talked to you and did all those things. But so anyway, let's talk about a little bit of background first, because gosh, I know your story and all those things, but people don't know. I mean, you've been an athlete your whole life, so let's talk about some of your journey with your athletics and all the different things you've done and you're still doing today, and then we'll get into impacting hearts.
Yeah. Well, how far back you want to go?
Well, we can go baseball at Vandy, right? We can go there.
Yeah. So I'll just say, before that, I always knew I wanted to be a professional athlete, and didn't know what sport per se. Loved all of them growing up. Going into college, I had the option to play D1 soccer, football, or baseball. I wanted a great education, and I wanted to play at the highest level. I liked baseball more than soccer, and so I felt like baseball was probably my best path. And so had the opportunity to go to Vandy and play D1 SEC baseball, as good as it gets, and to get a great education. And yeah, man, I thought I was on my way. Took a hard left at Vandy, got there. The coach that recruited me ended up retiring the summer before I got there. So I had already committed. Everything was happening. I was going. They brought in the coaching staff from Clemson, who are amazing, and ended up winning national championships for Vanderbilt. But I didn't go to Clemson because I didn't want to play for that type of environment. I will run through a brick wall for you if you ask me nicely. And Scott is my boss. You probably have seen this. And you never did this, but if you yell at me, I shut down. I've grown and I'm able to deal with it better now, but especially as a 18, 19-year-old kid. And that environment was one with a lot of yelling and screaming to motivate. And all the guys responded well to it. I did not. It was miserable. And so I mistook my distaste for my situation for a distaste for baseball. And so instead of, my inner circle was saying, Jay, just deal with it. And for 3 years, look at it as a job, get through and get drafted, or transfer and figure out. In baseball, you have to play 3 years of college before you can enter the draft.
Right.
And I was unwilling to do that. Everyone else's motivation was money. They're like, just get your signing bonus and then you can do whatever you want. I've never been motivated by money. One of the other things I was passionate about was skiing. I hadn't skied since I was 12, but I'd grown up skiing in Lake Tahoe, California, and was proficient. I was the youngest kid ever invited to U.S. Nationals. The guys that were a couple years older than me that I was beating when I was 12 ended up being the youngest U.S. ski team members ever, the youngest U.S. Olympians ever. Like, they went on to have pretty good careers, and so I figured maybe I'll go back and do that. And so I told my coach at Vandy, and it was the first time. He was wonderful. He expressed how much potential he thought I had, and communicated the reason he interacted with me the way that he did was because he was trying to elevate my play. He saw something special. If I had heard any of that before that day, I probably would have stayed, but at that point my decision was made up. So they did this really cool thing where they gave me 2 years. They held my scholarship, my spot on the team, my place in school, and it was like a leave of absence, and I could come back if I wanted. So I took that 2 years leave of absence, moved out to Lake Tahoe to pursue freestyle skiing, making the U.S. ski team, and going to the Olympics. So that was chapter 1.
Oh man, well, we only have an hour, so we with that. And then, so I met you when you were here in Park City. You missed making the Olympic team by, I think, 12 100ths of a second, some 3 100ths of a second, or something like that.
It wasn't just time, but I was kind of in the running for 2010, 2014. Yeah, I was real close. The first qualification event, the top 2 went on. I got 3rd. And so that was the end of my story for my qualification run in 2015.
Right.
But it's one of those, freestyle skiing is a judge sport, so it's not as clear cut as who's the fastest down. And I skied, the 6 of the best runs I've ever skied my entire life when I had to. And I think that I could have won and no one would have argued. I could have gotten second, no one would have argued. I got 3rd. No, it was at that point, it's, every few guys are doing really awesome, and it's what who the judges say was better that day.
Right. So lucky for you that you came into my life and you got hired at Ruth's Chris when I'd already discovered emotional intelligence, and I wasn't yelling at people as much anymore. So, because very early in my career, I didn't know how to communicate. I'll be honest with you. And so you tend to raise your voice, use your dad voice, or however you want to do that. Say, explain it when you don't have a strong way of actually negotiating with people and things like that. And I mean, you're an amazing employee. You did everything that was asked for you, and then some. And everybody loved you and things. Like I was, like, I don't know if you saw the message. Jason Teague's watching, and he said Panther, and Jason was on the show. He's got his new thoracic mobility bar. Got a message from Adam, was like, I got an appointment. How do I watch the show on replay? Right. So we've got some Ruth's Chris people that we worked with that we're all still friends with, that they're watching the show. And so you then, I remember while you're at Ruth's Chris, you decided to, move away, from the skiing because you didn't make the team. You had a choice to like stay in that for another 4 years and try to make the next Olympics and do all the World Cup and all that stuff. But you decided to go play like professional, like beach volleyball, right?
Well, so towards the end of my ski career, actually after 2010, I think, didn't make the Olympic team. And I I went down, I also fractured my kneecap. And so I went down to SoCal to hang out with my best friend down there and discovered beach volleyball and fell in love with it. And so for the latter half of my career, I started spending some time in the summer down there playing just as a break, an outlet. And so, yeah, when I retired from skiing, I didn't know what was next. I didn't retire to go pursue beach volleyball, but I did very much want to go to Southern California so that beach volleyball could continue to be a part of my life and I could continue to compete in that and, you know, see to what level of I could get to in that sport. I didn't have clarity when I retired from skiing. You know, I felt like God was asking me to move on to the next thing. My passion for skiing, my willingness to sacrifice everything for it wasn't there anymore. The juice wasn't worth the squeeze, if you will. And so my life had always been dictated by passion. And so at that point in my life, I was passionate about skiing, beach volleyball, and my relationship with Jesus. And I wasn't good enough at volleyball to make a living at that. I was done with skiing. And so the other option in my mind was vocational ministry. And I didn't know what that would look like, but ultimately through a series of events, that's how I ended up being the director of Young Life Impacting Hearts down here in Orange County.
Right. Well, I was going to ask you, you know, how does someone get clarity, right? Because I remember, you know, deep conversations we had about that. So
Yeah.
it's like, you know, getting clarity on those things. So, so let's talk about Impacting Hearts, because this is not a normal Young Life group where it's like, you know, they're reaching out just to normal teenagers at a high school, like it would be here in Park City or things like that. So what makes the Impacting Hearts OC different than a typical Young Life, you know, mission that you would be on?
Yeah, so Young Life's mission is to introduce every kid to Jesus Christ and help them grow in their faith. And yeah, like you said, their traditional model is they view kind of schools as mission fields. Well, the more you get into the nitty gritty, you realize that if you're hanging out at a traditional school, you're not actually interacting with every kid. And some of the kids that get lost in that model are foster, homeless, trafficked, and incarcerated youth. Their education is non-traditional oftentimes. And like, so for foster youth, they go to high school, but the average foster youth lives in 14 different homes before they turn 18. So they probably go to 4 or 5 different high schools. So, you know, there's not time to build relationship in a meaningful way. Our ministry is to that population specifically. So we do a lot of work with social services, and you know, I grew up in a home with 2 parents, and so I don't have the background where it's like I fully relate with this population. It was some of my buddies in LA were doing something like this. I got to be a part of it before it was even a Young Life thing. Young Life saw what we were doing, loved it, and we became a part of Young Life in LA. But as I got involved, God just broke my heart for the reality of the lives of these kids, and opened my eyes to the ways that their lives were forever changed and improved through relationship with loving adults and an opportunity to learn about a God that created them and loves them. And so this passion in me just grew. And then the more I learned about, you know, there's 500,000 foster kids in the US, and they're everywhere. They're in every city, every town, every state. And so as I saw the amazing things that were happening in LA, I'm a bit of a visionary. And so I immediately went to, well, there's this huge national problem. How do I tackle that? And as I saw, Young Life is pretty much everywhere as well. And so the light bulb came on, and I thought, if I can figure out how to equip every Young Life staff person to identify this population, to love them well, and to meet them where they are, then all of a sudden those 500,000 kids in foster care and all the other children in incarceration and homelessness and trafficking, we can impact all of them through this network of Young Life staff that love Jesus and love kids. And so that was where it started. So I was in LA. We've since grown into Orange County, and now, just in the last 2 years, Young Life has said, we see the need and we're on board. So they've started a new initiative called Young Life One. And right now there's 40 area directors in 40 different cities in the US that are all getting trained in this type of ministry. And so it's happening. It's really, really exciting.
That is. I mean, I remember when it was just, something that, you were doing, on the side, right? You were just going to a couple meetings and those type of things, to now having 40 area directors and having them trained. Is just like, there definitely has to be God's hand on this, right? For all those things that are happening.
For sure.
Right?
For sure.
And when you sent me your bio, I know you were working with foster kids, but you also included in there trafficking. Kids have been trafficked, and I can't even talk, but this is the thing. I can't edit it out because this is live, right? But my wife is a huge fan of the Operation Underground Railroad here in Utah that does a lot of work in that. So what are you seeing that's expanded, or why is that become part of, like, under your umbrella, is the trafficking piece? Is that something that's that big in Orange County and LA, in that area?
It's everywhere, man. Human trafficking is the fastest growing criminal industry in the United States and in the world. And the most significant portion of that is sex trafficking. And 80% of people that are trafficked are in foster care, and the average age is 13 in the US. So there's this direct correlation. And it's kind of just being involved in foster care is where we started, but it's opened my eyes to trafficked, foster, homeless, incarcerated youth. It's the same population of kids in different seasons. If you're 80% of people that are incarcerated in the US are or were in foster care. There's a huge correlation between homelessness and foster as well. So it's the same group of kids that, at one point they're in a group home, and then they're being trafficked, and then they're in jail, and then they're homeless. And, obviously it's not every kid, but there's a huge correlation. And
right.
And it's something that's an education. As we learn more, as our eyes are open to trafficking, it's nauseating to find out that for the most part, most of us could, with a specific Google search, could find a young girl or young boy that is being sold in a hotel within 10 miles of where you live. And so when people discover that, it's not some foreign thing that's happening in the worst parts of the US or overseas. It's happening in your backyard. And when you realize it's happening in your backyard, you have to wrestle with that, and you have to decide, am I going to own that, or am I going to continue to say it's someone else's problem? And we all have the right to make whatever decision we want, but a lot of people are deciding that they're not okay with it, and they're trying to figure out what they can do to help.
Yeah, I understand. And if anybody's out there watching the show right now live, and you got any questions for Jay, just feel free to drop a comment, and then I'll be able to get it to him. We can do that. So Jay, how can, like, someone who is listening to the show, or someone who may listen to this on the replay, how can they help you and your organization? Is there donations or a way that they could get in touch with you to do that?
Yeah, I mean, we're a nonprofit, so we run entirely on donations. I'd love to have conversations with people. I think education is a huge role that I get to play. The truth is, with all of these kids, they need community around them. And so if you want to be someone that wants to endeavor into a lifelong relationship of mentoring and discipling, that's amazing. If you're not sure that's your sweet spot, how can you maybe support someone that does? Or how can you come around a foster, your buddy that wants to foster, and say, hey, I'll give you a couple $100 a month, or I'll help you with babysitting, or I'll cook you meals twice a week, or whatever it is. It takes a community, because to step in directly to the lives of these kids is a massive commitment. But if we can figure out how to say, how do 5 or 6 of us step in and help own the weight of this, I think it's something that's more manageable.
Right. Well, the first question that came in is from Jason, and he wants to know, do you even wash your hair?
I would say once every 3 to 7 days ish. Jason, right. I'm shaving it off, but in the next couple of weeks it's coming off, so stay tuned.
Jason, he did tell me before the show that I'm growing mine out, and he's actually going to cut his off. So We're going to switch roles here.
Right.
But we did get a serious question from Ken Arnold. How can we help in other ways than financial, boots on the ground type stuff?
Yeah, depending on what your skill set is, a lot of I find a lot of men get excited about and passionate about, like specifically in the vein of trafficking, like helping get the people out of the situation. So like getting a girl out from under the grips of her pimp. And that's a wonderful component of it. But at the end of the day, it's all a long-term relationship. That's the answer, because most of these kids in trafficking aren't held there by physical danger. They aren't worried about losing their lives or this pimp killing their sister. There is some of that, but for the most part, it's mental and emotional manipulation. And what they're finding is that they'll remove people from the situation, and then once they have their freedom back, they willingly go back into that situation. And so it's relationship. We need to get around these kids in all of the situations of dire need and love them. These kids don't know that their life has value, and so they're not going to treat it as if it has value. So if we can step in, and in Young Life, we talk about earning the right to be heard, and we know that kids don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So you got to step in without an agenda and say, hey, I'm just going to love you because I love you. And irregardless of what you do with that, I'm going to stay here. And I know that you're going to buck and you're going to push and you're going to try and remove me from your life, because the more you realize how close I'm getting, the more you realize I have the capacity to hurt you. And every adult in your life has hurt you. So they're going to preemptively try and remove you. But if you're willing to say, hey, I'm here and I'm not going anywhere, eventually that trust will be formed. And then you have the opportunity to help them understand that they are created by a God who loves them, that they are created for this amazing purpose. And once they realize that they're loved and they're cared for, then they can treat their life in accordance and start to make new decisions. And so it's relationship. And there's so many great organizations out there. Young Life is obviously a great one, and we're everywhere and we're growing in this specific field. But there's probably, wherever you live, there's someone that's trying to do something about foster, homeless, trafficked, incarcerated kids. So figure out if you're willing to dive into a relationship, and if not, how can you support someone that is?
Right. Ken, thank you for the question. So let's ask this, because you got 40 different area directors being trained. I doubt, Ken may be in Orange County, may be able to volunteer with you or something like that. But is there a way, can he contact you and then you connect him with somebody in his city or something like that?
Absolutely, man. You can put my phone number, my email address, our ministry website, put whatever you want out to the people. Right. And this is what I do. I'm passionate about it. I'm seeing God create change. And so I'll talk to anybody and everybody as long as they want to chat and do whatever I can to help. And I know a lot of people at this point, so I can probably connect you anywhere you are.
Right. So Jay is not on Facebook. He's on LinkedIn. So Ken, you're on LinkedIn. Just click on his profile, Jay Panther, and you can send him a private message, and he can get with you there. It'd probably be the fastest way for you to do that.
That's great.
And then let's talk about that. You said you're seeing God make change in all these things. Obviously, he's growing the organization, but let's talk about some heart, like a success story, like a kid that was on the wrong path, flipped around and is doing something right. So if you change the names to keep people safe and stuff like that, or to leave the name out, but I know people love hearing stories about how this is impacting people.
Yeah, man, I have so many, and at a high level, we're seeing all these kind of nasty statistics that I'm sharing with you. We're seeing these kids are becoming outliers and in their success stories. But one kid, Sean, grew up in and out of different group homes. Both his parents went to jail for violent crimes and drug abuse and just all sorts of nastiness. He got involved in gangs early because the only neighbor in his park was run by gangs. So if you want to play basketball, that was part of his world. So we met him. He showed up at one of our weekly clubs because the group home he was living at was coming. And for months he showed up. He'd wear his hood, a furrowed brow, didn't speak or say hi to anyone. And just over time, with consistent interaction, eventually we'd see him smile and then laugh. And then he was talking a little bit. the next thing you know, he goes to summer camp with us, and he's a 15-year-old kid running around, playing in the water and having crushes on girls. And it was, he's not an adult fighting for his life anymore. And he gave his life to Jesus there. And on the way home, we were talking on the bus, and he was sharing with me his life situation and how he's dealing drugs. And he's like, I don't want to be in this gang anymore. And I know enough about gangs to know that getting out of a gang is no joke. And I said, Sean, do you know what it's going to take to get out? What do we need to do? What is this going to look like? And it was a brutal situation for him to get out, the commitment that it took for him to get out, but he did. But there was a group of adults that were there that bandaged his wounds and fed him and gave him safe places to sleep and to get away. And it was a long, gnarly process, but he went on to become a leader in our ministry. He went to junior college. He has a career job. He's married with a kid now, involved in his local church. Like, he's a full-on success story. And we're seeing that, man. And I'm still in touch with him. He's in his late 20s now, and it's really special to see. But it took thousands of man hours to get him to there, and we're still in it, right? Like, he's, I think, about 27 now, and in a lot of ways he still has the development of like a 21-year-old. So he's a significant success story, but he's different than what you might measure a 27-year-old that grew up in a stable home. The measure of success might look different, but it's remarkable. Yeah.
That's amazing. Because I've done so much research, and actually I'm building my first course, which is it's called Power Mode On. The sleep course is actually going to be Sleep Mode On, and then I have this other one called Power Mode On. So these two modes, right? And what I'm really understanding on a very deep level is that we are programmed in the first 6 years of our lives, right? There's our brains are in theta, which is a hypnotic state, and we end up playing out that programming for the rest of our lives. And it's very hard to change that. I've actually put a lot of pieces together on how to like recode the software, really. And so when you say, hey, he's 27, but he's really a 21-year-old, he's got still some programming from that first 6 years in his life, and like all of those type of things. And I'm, there's you and I should talk afterwards, like maybe how this program can, we can, instill some of these things maybe with your crew and stuff like that and what you're doing. And I'll be happy to help and donate those things in the process, that stuff. But that's an amazing piece of the puzzle, because you're right. It takes thousands of man hours to do that. But first of all, the kid has to be shown love, and then want to change and want to get out and do those type of things. And so I commend you on that. And you told me you grew up in a stable home, and you didn't, it's hard for you to relate. What type of learning curve have you had to go through to be able to really stay the course with these kids and that are in such a bad spot? I mean, a bad is like not even I can't even come up with the right word, right, to put this.
Right. Yeah. Well, so we all experienced some trauma growing up, and you're exactly right. Really the trauma science is showing that in utero, and then the first like 2 to 3 years of marriage, or excuse me, not marriage.
That too, but that's not the subject, right?
Are like the most significant brain development, but then it does continue on for the first 6 years, and that the trauma and stressors you experience, they literally change your brain. And so I had trauma growing up. My home was far from perfect or stable. My parents loved me, but I had my own stuff. So I'm familiar with trauma and have spent my adult life working through that, like, a lot of adults have. So the idea of trauma needing to work through it was something I was familiar with. Obviously, the degree to which some of these kids are experiencing it is something that's much more than that, but that's okay. The general idea is the same. But then there was absolutely an education period where it started with some buddies went to India to work with orphans. They came back, they were living in LA, and they're like, we live in LA. LA has everything. Let's work with orphans here. We should have to go to India to work with orphans. Well, so they came back and we're all jazzed up to help the orphans. Well, in the U.S., we don't call them orphans, and so we had a quick education on the foster care system and all of that. And so it has been there was a significant learning, and I'm still learning. But it's everyone that's in it, all the social workers, the judges, the counselors, everyone that you interact with, they're not there because they're getting rich and they spend a lot of time in school to get where they are. They're there because they care. And so, we hear the nightmare stories about the bad group home staff or the social worker that doesn't care. And that happens, but that is 99% of them are people that are doing they're doing the best they can in a really broken situation, and they need and want help. And so they will answer phone calls and texts and emails, and they will tell you everything they know. So it's just a matter of showing up and asking questions, and the education is easily available if you're willing to ask the questions and figure it out.
Right. I would imagine that the level of empathy you have to have and putting yourself in their shoes is probably, off the charts, like, major league level, no pun intended, but because as an athlete, I raced go-karts growing up. You don't go into a go-kart race or go to a at bat going, hey, I'm going to fail, right? I'm not going to win this race. I'm not going to get a hit. I'm not going to advance the runner. I'm not going to press the gas pedal, those type of things. And I can imagine, in contrast to that, a lot of these kids, the story they tell in themselves is like so negative and so wrong, like, and all those things. And then here you are, this, all-star athlete. You can pick any sport you want, this type of thing. So your mindset and the story you tell yourself and the story they're telling themselves are so far apart. You had to really like put yourself into their shoes.
Yeah, it's something I've grown in. My wife is helping me grow in my empathy a lot. Interesting part of my trauma was that I more or less turned my empathy and kind of sadness off to survive. So I can intellectually empathize. I am learning to feel my feelings and to connect the two. So I think that a lot of the things that I have learned to do well are helpful, that I bring to the table to these kids. And I can listen to their stories, and I can intellectually know that is the most devastating thing I've ever heard. But I don't necessarily feel it. And in some ways I have, I'm not saying this is the case, but for me, I've kind of viewed it at this, because it's like, what else do you do? I view it as, in some ways, it's a little bit of an asset. Not that I want to stay that way. I want to be able to feel empathy better, but in the sense that my wife is super empathetic and feels her feelings really well. She doesn't know 99% of what I see on a day-to-day basis, because it would shut her down. And we've established, like, there's a boundary on what I share and what I don't. So in some ways, it's been beneficial for me to be able to hear this volume of stories and have it not totally break me. So it feels like there's a unique wiring that is beneficial, or I've at least been able to use in a beneficial way. But yeah, man, you have to be able to see these kids. And as much as anything, you have to understand the way that trauma has informed their brain, so that you can't interact with them the way that someone that hasn't experienced that trauma, their brain does not function or see the world the same. And so if you go into it and this is something we deal with the mentors, if you go into it and you want to treat these kids like your kids and set boundaries and expectations, and if you don't meet them, we're going to draw a hard line, and I'm not going to put it in the work if you don't put in the work, that doesn't work for the most part. You have to show up with as much infinite grace and patience as you can. And you have to commit to showing up no matter what they do. It's like Jesus, right? Jesus, his forgiveness and love and patience, it's not conditional. It's not conditional on us putting in the work or us getting to this level by this time. It's infinite. And we have to come in with the same mindset of, and also be aware of, there's going to be times where I'm going to be frustrated and angry and beyond capacity. And how do we do this in a way that's, as volunteers and mentors, that's sustainable and long-term? I don't want you to be a volunteer for 12 months and then burn out. I want you to engage in a relationship for a lifetime. And so what does it look like for us to do that? And that's an ongoing part of the conversation as people have kids and lose jobs and sell homes, and these life things happen. How do we incorporate this in a way that maybe you hang out 3 times a week for a while, and then maybe you just talk on the phone once every other week for a season because you got to get through this other stuff. So it's the trial with these kids is real, and you need to be aware of that, and also be kind to yourself. Like they're gonna test you. Just, I don't have my own kids, but probably just like your own biological kids test you, and got to keep showing up.
Yeah, today Rylan turns 19.
God.
Not today. He turns 19 next month, but today's his first day at Salt Lake Community College.
Oh wow, that's exciting.
Yeah. So he had a little gap, half year, and then
For
started.
him.
You remember Ryland, right? So
Of course.
like, yeah.
I've seen magic tricks and all sorts of. He's great, man.
Yeah, but he's
Right
definitely kids test you, and that's a thing. And so, but it really gets into what you talked about. And I remember our friend Darren Yeager, when I used to go to his Tuesday morning men's group, talked about, praying to the Holy Spirit to help reflect God's unconditional love, right, to other people. And, when it comes to children or even everybody else, a lot of times we put conditions on them, right? And when your biological child is born, you love them just for who they are, right? The fact that they were born, right? There's this unconditional love, and you're changed from the inside out like you never would imagine. And you'll experience that one day, I know. And but that's hard, is that you get older, you're like, oh, you're 3, you should be able to do this, or you're 12, you should be able to do this, or you're 19, you should be able to do this, right? And we put these conditions on people. And I remember I heard Tony Robbins asked and it's in the documentary, I'm Not Your Guru. And it said, which of your 2 parents' love did you crave the most? And, most people, it's the dad, because the dad's out doing something and doing those type of things. And for me, it was my dad. And he said, who did you have to be to get the love that you craved? Right. And so what happens is that programs us, go back to programming, right? It programs us that to get love, it creates a love language for you to get love out from the world. Then once you move out of your house, your parents' house, that you do those same things. So for me, it was like winning trophies and championships and excelling at things. So I did that in racing. I did that with restaurants, winning awards and championships and having record-setting P&Ls and sales and those type of things. But I had to change my love language, because that's not the way my wife expresses love to me. She doesn't give me the love for bringing the trophy home and saying, hey, I won this. And so it's really, and also then I look at my kids and I realized all of that, and I went to them and said, you have to do nothing for me to love you, right? I love you since the day you were born for who you are. And my whole goal is to help you become the best you that you can become. And it's taken me a long time to get there, because, it's like, I'm a competitor. I like competing. Like, that model worked for me. Let's get my kid to go compete. And they've never competed in anything other than Rylan played some baseball when he was younger. And, but never on a level like you have, or I have, or, those type of things. And so it's amazing that, through this process of, sanctification that we go through, how we learn these things. And it's, this is the first show that I've really talked about, any of these type of subjects. And so I'm so excited to have you here and reconnect with you. And we did this cold. We didn't really plan this or anything, right?
That's the best, man.
Yeah.
Your point is wonderful, and it's both and, right? It's, specifically with kids, it's how do we love you unconditionally, but knowing that just like we see God does, part of love is correction and guidance. And so it's, it's not just infinite forgiveness and just like, oh, try to be better. It's grace and truth, perfectly in line. So it's always forgiving, but also always like loving you so much that I want what's best for you, and knowing what's best for you isn't just letting you continue to fail or make these same mistakes. So it's this constant balance. And, like you said, learning even the love language. So much of us being able to love people well is education and understanding. And so much of learning to love these kids well, we've already talked so much about trauma and brain development, but a big part of what we do with all of our volunteers is teaching them about trauma-informed care. And the more that we can understand ourselves and each other, the more that we can love each other where we are, and kind of clearly see what are the things that we can ask for you and what are the things that we can't right now. how do we continue to bring grace and truth together as we move along.
Right. That's so beautiful. I want to go back and talk about empathy for a second, because I think what the style of empathy that you are using, that I learned about, and by the way, you know that I've done lots of research on a lot of different things. You and I have talked about marriage, and the book by Dr. Les and Leslie Carroll, like Save Your Marriage Before It Starts. I've read books on, how to hire for empathy. I've read, all these different things, right? And the common thread, no matter what the subject, leadership, marriage, relationships, kids, all of those things, the common thread that comes up everywhere is empathy. And even in this book right up here, it's called Never Split the Difference. Negotiate Like Your Life Depends on It by Chris Voss. He's the former FBI lead hostage negotiator. And he has a thing in there, one of his 9 tools, and one of the tools is called tactical empathy. And I think that's, you're able to tactically empathize with what's going on with that child and their life and their history and those things, and put yourself in their shoes. But you're also removed enough to where you also can remain a clear head about yourself and help move the conversation on with them. And so the particular wiring you have, you've naturally come across that, and you've actually tried to, through your wife's, connect more with your feelings. But you're also not able, like, because I would imagine like 80% of us would hear the stories that you hear, and we'd be in the corner balled up crying, right? About what's going on, right? And so I see that as an asset, right? Of that, and of what you're doing and the role you're in, and a divine tool, right? That you're able to do that, and still you can empathize with them tactically, but you also are able to remain detached enough to where you can help them move to the next level and give them love and understanding and unconditional love, because you're, like you said, not in the corner balled up in the fetal position crying because of all the stories you hear throughout the day and every week for years, right? All those things. So
yeah, absolutely. I agree. I do see it as an asset in all of my life, maybe except for in my marriage, because my wife is one of the most emotionally intelligent people I'm probably the most emotionally intelligent person I've ever met. And everyone else in my life, I've learned to fake the feeling that I know that I should be feeling, or at least amplified a little bit, so that they are getting what they need from me. And it's not insincere. It's just I'm loving people in that way. And but with my wife, she can tell that I'm not feeling what she would expect or hope that I would be feeling. And so then there's a disconnect there. And so that's something we have to navigate.
Right. Well, I think that there are disconnects, especially in marriage, right? Because there's one thing, it's because there's a different expectation, because like, my wife's the same way. She expects me to feel the same way she does about certain things, like Operation, Underground Railroad, right? I mean, we'll watch one of their things and she's bawling and tearing. I'm like going, that sucks, right? I don't have like the emotional connection, and I'm tearing up. I mean, it's very extremely sad, situation. It would donate money to them and those type of things. And they're here in Utah, and we're, looking to, volunteer with them and those type of things. And, but you're right. Like, we see about what's going on in the world, like our Capitol in DC gets stormed, right? She has a different emotional response to that than I do. Right. There's these different, emotional responses that, the ones we love the most, because they were trained, to have a certain emotional response to things and emotional intelligence by their family, and they're all different. And finding a way to dance with that is really the important piece of the puzzle, there. And so it is a dance. And, we've been together for over 20 years now, my wife and I, and we still are learning to dance as things change. And so you've been, 3.5 years you've been married, right? So
still brand new.
Yeah. You're just like, your dance haven't even started good yet. You got a ways to go, right? So
we're still walking onto the dance floor together.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, oh, wait, you like this song, right? It's a whole different thing, right? It's like, you want to dance, right? For sure. But wow, this is an amazing conversation. So what's next on the horizon for Jay Panther and Impacting Hearts?
Yeah, great question. So God's opening some really neat doors with what's happening here in Orange County. Orange County is a pretty big geography, and A lot of people know Orange County for the kind of hyper wealthy parts of it, but there's a lot of Orange County that is not Newport Beach or Laguna. So our ministry right now is focused in kind of the northeastern part of the county, because that's where most of the population of kids that we live exist. But a big part of the turmoil of these kids' lives is the transition going home to home. And so they lose this network. And for the most part, they try to keep kids in the county that they're in. And so our goal has always been to have ministry through the entire geography of the county. So maybe you can't come and hang out where you used to, but we can connect you to the same type of people that are going to love you in the same type of way if you move an hour south. And so that's kind of our next objective, is to kind of complete the geography of ministry here in Orange County. And so that's a big part of what we're doing here. And then the focus on equipping other people around the nation to do it. So it's pretty remarkable. I mean, 2 years ago, it was me working by myself. I was the director and I had volunteers. In 2 years, I now have 4 staff people and 30 volunteers, and it's kind of exploded. And a decent part of that has happened in pandemic. So to see how God has blessed it, I work hard and I try to do my best, and I think I'm good at my job, but it is obvious that God's hand is in it. And I think in some ways, what he has done in the last year, when so much of the world we're all struggling, right? And there's so much that's shutting down and shrinking and trying to survive. And here we are growing at the most significant rate we've ever grown. I think that's an opportunity for us to step back and say, I told you God with this, it's me being awesome that this was God. And I think that was it. So,
well, I think that we all should take on endeavors or be parts of. You don't have to be the spearhead like you are or I am with the Modern Longevitarian, or the new show that we're going to have coming out at some point called The Amplified Man. You don't always have to be the spearhead, but you can come and be a staff member or a volunteer, or because everybody has different talents, and not everyone wants to be the point person for that. But what I was saying is that we should all be a part of something that's bigger than ourselves, that really requires God's hand or Spirit's hand, or whatever you call that, and have them so it can be a guidance and make it bigger than it's not of your own work. And even Matthew McConaughey talks about that, right? It's like there's been moves that have happened in his life that were not of his own doing; they were of God's hand. And the same thing for you, the same thing for me, right? When I got furloughed in March, it was a blessing to come back home to Utah, not be in California. I love California, miss California. I actually spent a lot of time in Orange County. I've had 2 manager and training programs in Irvine that I've been through. I've spent a total of about 3 months in Irvine, working there and learning and those type of things. And you and I when I was working in Santa Monica, you and I had dinner one night, and I drove down and got stuck in all the traffic on the 405 and, all that stuff, right? Because people, if you're not in California, you don't understand how the 405 drives the time it takes to get a place. And so in one county, in Orange County, if you're in Wisconsin, it may take you 15 minutes to drive. It's going to take you an hour and a half to drive at the wrong time of day or certain time of day in California. And so having different meetings across these different places can give you more access to more children. And I think the thing that I really learned from what you talked about is that as these kids move to different schools, different homes, and all those things in the same county, you're probably the only consistent thing they have for a number of years.
Oh, for sure. I said maybe there's social worker, but even oftentimes kids have many social workers as well. So there's plenty of stories where we are the only consistent adult.
Wow, man, what you're doing in the world is absolutely amazing. And to me, it's an honor to be a friend with you, man. We met by happenstance. You happened to walk in, we went to church together, but you also, came into Ruth's Chris, and we interviewed you and we hired you. And I know you won over a bunch of hearts then, and I know you're still winning over hearts now, and in a different way. And so, for thanks for everything. Thanks for doing all this. So, where can people find you online?
Yeah, so our ministry has a little Instagram page, Impacting Hearts OC. I think that's probably the simplest way to find us. We do have a website at ocimpactinghearts.younglife.org. I'm on LinkedIn. Yeah, so I would say that probably our ministry Instagram page is the easiest way to find us. And I just have to quickly say, I love what you said. We are all created for service. We can look at the way Jesus lived and see that he absolutely took care of himself. We are embodied and we are human. And so there's things that are necessary for us to survive and thrive. But we are created to love other people. And this idea that this life is about our happiness and maximizing, our pleasure, getting ours, it's a lie. And it's detrimental. People are seeing that. You get into something and you serve and you love people even to your own detriment sometimes. And it's experientially, you can tell this is better than anything else. And so, if you haven't tried it yet, give it a try. It's worth giving it. If you don't think it's true after you try it, then go on to the next thing.
Right, exactly. Giving your time and your heart to something and is so much more, no pun intended, but so much more impactful than just giving some money, writing a check, or doing something online, right, where you can.
Well, it's both and. I think there's something special about service, but I don't want to discount. I think there are people that are part of this whose giftings and wirings are such that they spend a lot of time making money and doing what they do professionally that maybe prohibits them from doing some of the other hands-on stuff. But it doesn't minimize their impact, and they're part of the team. But there is something and also there is something special about, the time spent sacrificing in some way or serving somebody. So it is special.
It is, right? Because you don't want to sacrifice your own family for this, right? If you have a family and things like that, you've got to.
Yeah, that's your priority. That's your.
Right. Things are taken care of at home. So it depends on where you are in your life, right? You don't want to throw the family out, so you can do this. And we've seen those mistakes happen over the years as well, and as a restaurant manager, I've worked, been away from the house a lot. Right. And so I've made those mistakes and stayed at work longer than I should have because I felt responsible for it or those type of things. And so it's important to find balance with all of that. And they're all super important for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. Balance is really healthy. Priorities help establish that balance. And so it's God, family, his kingdom. And if your priorities get out of whack, then it's going to fall apart somewhere down the chain. So.
Right. Well, of all the people I know, you're one of the ones that trusts God more than anybody and really follows his prompting. And I've heard some of your stories when you spoke at men's breakfast. And by the way, I just did another men's breakfast with Bob at his house.
Oh, very cool.
Past Saturday. Since I've been back in Utah, I've helped with like 4 or 5 of those. And so
wonderful.
And so Bob's 78 now, maybe 79. Yeah.
Wow.
And I love hanging out with real life, longevitarians, right? Modern longevitarians.
Right.
So much wisdom there. And he's so deep in the Lord and so it recharges me for sure to go hang out with him. He intermittent fast. He's keto. He's best shape he's been in a number of years. So seeing how he's like still digging, and he's like, we're hiking on Tuesday. And I'm like, Bob, I got my show at Tuesday at the time you're hiking, so I can't make it. But, I did a hike with him back in the summer and we did a 6-mile hike and I was over 30 hours fasted. But I was struggling to keep up with him for sure.
Wow.
It was like, yeah, it was tough. It's tough keeping up with him. But anyway, we're going to wrap this up. Jay, thanks for coming on the show, man.
Man, thanks for having me. I wish we had another hour.
Well, we could, but I think when we're doing a live show and all those things, it kind of like it expires on us. Like people, only have so much
Okay.
time in the moment. Now this link will switch over to a replay or previously live, and so people who get this, they can play it again. And I see a lot of people. I can tell by the numbers that they listen to part of it, and then I can see they come back, right? Because there'll be like so many listens, and then unique listeners will be lower, so I can see that they maybe come back to it.
Oh, cool.
But we can have you come back on the show, right? It's like,
Okay.
we can do that. And this is episode 62, as I mentioned. 0 repeat guests so far, and I have 4 more guests scheduled this week. I don't normally have 5 guests in a week, but I had offered for you to come on today, and then I had offered somebody to come on Wednesday or next Wednesday, and they chose this week. But I haven't got a confirmation, so it looks like I'm going to have 5 guests this week and no solo episodes. But that's cool, right? I'm trusting that this is guided by God, and when people are signed up on the show, they're signed up on the show, and we'll go that, and we'll make it happen. And so it is what it is, right? I'm just going to go with it and go with the flow. So
That's right.
thanks for being here, and
Yeah,
I really enjoyed your show. I enjoyed talking to you, catching up.
Yeah, you too, brother. It's great to see you.
All right, man. All right, take care.
Bye.
We're going to roll credits. We're just going to let it go. We're just going to sign out and tune in for tomorrow's show. We're going to be talking with the baker of a paleo bread in Salt Lake City, Utah. And I've been keto for a long time, so this is one of my favorite things because bread is something you don't really normally have on the ketogenic diet. But so we're going to have a super show tomorrow. And anyway, Jay, thanks again. Talk to you later.
Thanks later, guys.